So everybody assume you guys went to the keynote? What'd you think? Huh? Yeah? All right. Well, the kingdom of Dell will answer. We're going to keep the ball rolling here with this conversation, because this is what Bob was talking about on connectivity. So Rob Sonders and I will be leading this presentation. Rob will be driving a lot of this. I'll kind of be wandering around with you. Rob, do you want to kick us off? And did everybody get the QR code when you came in, do the scan or whatever? Fantastic. We appreciate that guidance. You going to go to the next one?
Yeah. Awesome. So thanks everyone for joining. A little bit about me. I love this slide, not because it's a big picture of me in the middle. It's because I have Microsoft and Azure and Kubernetes and maybe Linux. You know, about 4 or 5 years ago, I was up in Redmond meeting with some of the Microsoft guys, and I kind of had this epiphany that, well, I better start learning Linux and Kubernetes really, really fast. And a lot of the sessions we're going to talk about even later this week come back here for tomorrow and Saturday. We talk a lot about that too. Not as much today, but it's super cool and super exciting where everything is going with SQL Server with all of those tools. So Steve, first, wait, and this is also in my spare time. I do also raise and show these Pembroke Welsh Corgis, and since we're here, we went there to Pembroke earlier this week, a couple days ago.
Yep.
And that was pretty awesome. I did not find any Pembrokes Welsh Corgis. I know, I looked everywhere, but it was still fun. It was cool to be there. Of course, I posted a lot of that on social, and now everybody's pretty happy that I did that. So Steve, go ahead here real quick.
Yeah. So Steve McMaster, I have the Microsoft Technical Alliances as the strategist within the role. So been doing that for a little over 10 years. And the things that we're excited is not just taking the experience we've been doing with Microsoft for a very long time, and not just with SQL, but going beyond, like we said in the keynote, beyond going just around relational data and touching things like what we're going to be talking about in this topic today. So Rob's going to be driving most of this. Like I said, I'll be walking around the room a little bit. And we do have, if you have a question, the question ball. And Rob, let's just jump right into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
The first slide, and I'll start walking over that
I just keep wanting to hear like Darth Vader's Death March
exactly.
when Steve's walking around here. That's dun, dun, dun. Okay, sorry. Anyway, so SQL 2022, who's actually started using it already? Show of hands. Just a few? Okay, we need everybody to start, because this is a big deal. I'm sure everybody's been around SQL for a long, long time. I started 6.5, that kind of dates me. But about every 5 years or so is really when a new version comes out that's kind of the one that, makes my socks go up and down, right?
Exactly.
So, and this is the
dirty.
one. What's that?
It's not dirty.
No, it just makes my socks, literally, I get so excited, I've got to pull my socks. Okay. But a couple things we're going to talk about today. Backup and restore with SQL S3. That's not all that sexy, but it's pretty cool. And it's even cooler with the products that Dell brings to the market. And polybase access to external data in or with S3 compatible storage or object storage. That's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. And you saw Bob's keynote there. Actually, a lot of the stuff I ghost wrote for him just from a notebook perspective, which was pretty cool. Even using notebooks, right? If you're not using Azure Data Studio on notebooks, you should be. Because what did I do with Bob? I wrote a bunch of scripts, I put in the results, and I sent it all to him. And it was super easy to show and demo. So if you're not using Azure Data Studio or Jupyter Notebooks, please start learning it. So S3 capabilities and SQL 2022. But first, Dell's perspective. Dell is market leader here with I'm going to be using Dell ECS. We have object scale, we have power scale, which has the 1FS file system. We can also enable object. So we have a lot of different places where in your ecosystem you can bring object storage to the table. Remember, this is one of kind of the big three. We have block, SQL Server, we have file, and we now have object. The cool thing here you're going to see in my demos is I'm querying object storage also with SQL Server on block storage and joining them all together, and with big data sets. So you're going to see that here in a second. So again, here's the challenge. I need to access this object storage through SQL Server. And this is not a big scary thing. This is using T-SQL. And you've seen some of this probably already. S3 compatible storage with SQL against Parquet files and Dell Tech here foundationally at the bottom. But we're using what? We're using the same SQL engine. You saw that earlier in the keynote. It's the same SQL Server running at the edge, running in containers, which is what I love, running in Linux, running in Windows, virtual machine, physical, virtual. It's the same build. So you're using the same, everything I'm talking about, or everything I'm going to demo here, you can run against any SQL Server running anywhere. Now, pay attention to this space, especially around Parquet files. If you haven't started using that in Delta Lake, I highly recommend that because Microsoft is pushing a lot of, let's say, new thought leadership there. So that's a space you should pay attention to and start using in your organization. And of course, backup and restore, probably, again, not the coolest, most sexy thing, but a very mission critical thing. And if we can do it with S3, that's pretty awesome. The product that I used for the demo is Dell ECS, and this is our kind of our front-end GUI. You're going to see a lot of Dell's software tools over the next few days. They all have the same look and feel, so we're really kind of standardizing on this whole look and feel, which is great. You can see I looked at the dashboard then here. This is kind of cool. On the bottom, I have, better put my glasses on, I have a SQL Server namespace, so I've carved that out. Inside that namespace, I have some different personas. SQL admin, which is kind of the person that would have access to everything, and maybe a SQL data reader, just for read access, especially with object type storage. Inside that namespace, I have buckets. You're going to see that here in a little bit. I've got a read-only data bucket here, a SQL backup bucket, and a SQL external bucket. And then, of course, Grafana also deploys with ECS. Grafana is eating the world from a reporting standpoint. You find it everywhere. We find it with products like Azure Arc. You'll see that in later sessions also. But Dell uses it also from a containerized, or using it from a containerized workload perspective, using it as a reporting tool. Very powerful, very flexible, that you can tune to your reporting needs. But that's what ECS, Dell ECS brings to the table. You're also going to see me use a tool called the S3 browser. It's a free tool. You can download it. You see how I see my buckets there on the left and then some files that you can drill into on the right. You can't actually crack open the Parquet files here. That would be more like a Parquet file reader. But what I can see here is what's stored. Anything inside an object store. In this case, it's going to be Dell ECS. So one of the environments I have is a stack of Dell ECS connected to via a load balancer. One point to mention here, when you're going to see this in the demos, is the certificate for your ECS environment, your ECS admin. Super easy to do. Generate a certificate and load that to the OS of your SQL Server. It can be Linux. If you're going to use SQL in a container, you put it right into your Docker file. I've got a lot of scripts to show that also, or you just load it right into your cert manager from a Windows perspective. I've got to stop for a second. How many people here, I saw SQL Server 2022, who's running SQL on Linux or a container at this point? Not many. That's interesting to me, but I like to see that. I would highly recommend that. The sessions, when are we doing Arc? Tomorrow? There's a session here tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. We're doing Azure Stack HCI with our friends with AMD.
That's right.
Talking about Arc Data Services. And then we have a session at 1:40 talking about the whole idea for about 20 minutes.
Yep.
Around where the hockey puck's going. So if you have the opportunity at 1:40 to come in here, we'll talk about Dell's position on where we see SQL going.
Yeah, and again, everything we're talking about is where that hockey puck is already going. That train left the station. So Microsoft is doing a lot of work in the Linux space. I think that's always so ironic to say, but it's still It's crazy powerful. Another one of the environments that I have a lot of different labs. This one is kind of backed up with our friends from AMD. This was actually an OpenShift environment. Yep, there it is.
All of that is our AMD stuff. Well,
That
actually
is.
over there too. We got you all over the place, Dylan.
Yep. And then, of course, connecting to our ECS cluster. This one I used also PowerStore backends. So we had a few different, so I know there's a lot of lines on the screen here and a lot of spaghetti. I've got some compute up there, also containerized compute. I've got our PowerStore for storage. I've got ECS cluster for object. So I got block, object here, and then some more connectivity. So
and
that's
Rob, a quick note.
Yes.
Notice OpenShift and VMware, guys. So we'll talk about Azure Stack HCI tomorrow as well, but it's an and story. It's all the things that you can use from an architecture perspective. So a decision you might have made a decade ago around your virtualization technology, the answer is yes. Let's go forward.
Yep. And back to the container story real quick, because I was talking about it. I love deploying, and you saw even in the keynote, deploying a SQL Server in minutes, or deploying an always-on group in minutes. In minutes. Not hours, not days, not weeks, but minutes. All very possible with a containerized SQL Server. In any environment, like you say, it doesn't have to be OpenShift. It could be. Could be any of the cloud-native computing foundation Kubernetes environments. Whatever you have in your environment is great. So, of course, AMD, the best keeps getting better here. One of Dilip's slides. Great compute. I use it a ton in the environments we have in our labs. We always have great success when we're running AMD compute environments for sure, especially with our containerized workloads where we have a lot of dense environments running or a lot of, competition for resources. They always perform extremely well. So I'm going to jump into the S3 data virtualization demo. So let me do a couple of jumps around here to there.
Quick question while he does that.
Yeah.
How many of you are running containerized environments general? Not for SQL, but just you got some containerization, some Kubernetes in your architecture. I would be surprised if not every one of you have it in your environment. You probably don't know about it. From a DBA SQL perspective, you might not even know about it, but it's sitting over there in another group. The containerization guys were back in the corner, behind the door, slide the pizza boxes underneath the door. They got, some lettuce,
That's a
some
separate door
newspaper
from
in the corner
DBAs.
if they have an accident, kind of a thing. Yeah, they're over there. But go reach out to those people because that is absolutely where this whole cloud native story is going. Go ahead.
Yeah. I had on that point, I was talking with a client in California a couple years ago. And I was there doing like a 2 or 3 hour lunch and learn. And we had C-level folks, and we had data folks, and we have app folks, and we had sysadmin folks all in the room. And I was talking, this was probably back in the day of the SQL Server big data cluster. Remember that? That went up and then went away. But I was doing a big demo and talk about that. And the DBAs were really interested. And they said, well, we don't have a Kubernetes cluster. But the sysadmin guys in the same room said, oh, I have a Kubernetes cluster you guys can use. And this is the same company, mind you. So here I am. I'm kind of the marriage counselor for companies a lot when I go in and talk with, because you have to bring these people together, to your point. Because a lot of times people don't talk, but talk with your admin. Say, hey, do you have a Kubernetes cluster I can carve me off a namespace, please, and let me go to town and start playing with containerized SQL? That's not what we're talking about here, but still, remember, it all applies. Same SQL build. So this is a really fun demo. I like this one here. I did this one similar at PAS in the States in October. Let me kick it off here real quick. So again, I'm starting to use, let's see here, let's go stop start. There it goes. Oop. Let's do this and kill that real quick and start it over. I learned actually from a good friend of mine who I do a lot of demos with now to do a bunch of recordings for my demos.
So this is where the red dragon from the demo fairies came in from the keynote
That's right.
and are delaying your recording.
That's right. So we're looking at SQL Server, quick ADAPT version and server name. Of course, it is 2022. It's build 16. Everybody's probably pretty familiar with it. Of course, I'm using AdventureWorks. That's kind of the theme here right now. So what I wanted to do here is build a pretty massive table. What I'm trying to build is a 200 million row table. So I'm going to do a quick cross join because I'm not an R-bar kind of guy. I like to work in sets. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of the scripting here. I used a quick CTE to build a numbers table. If you're not using numbers tables, use them. They're great for sets. And yes, that is a bunch of numbers. Great. Put an index on it just to help it perform a little bit, even though it's a very high cardinality column or table of 1. And yes, 200 million numbers in that numbers table. That's great. Now I'm going to mock up some data. And you're going to see here in a second, I'm going to use CTAS to dump this into Parquet files. So I've got a simple select statement here using actually every probably Windows function I could possibly find and put on the screen at one time. Creating an order ID, a date, some time, and then that random description, which can get a little challenging for SQL Server. Nothing really fancy to see there, just wanted to gin up some data. But again, I'm going to make 200 million rows. And there's the random kind of sample of what I'm going to do here. And I'm going to join this to relational data here just in a little bit. So I've got my kind of data mocked up of what I want to do. Now I want to start doing some data visualization on this. First and foremost, need to make sure that Polybase is enabled and allow Polybase export is also turned on. I do have it turned on this system already. It looks like I'm changing it from 1 to 1. Yes, everybody knows I already had it turned on, which is perfectly fine. Now, for me, I always like to have a schema called ext for external. Do you have to do that? No. Do I like to see that? Yes. Would developers like to see that? I would hope so. Just kind of helps me point out, and you're going to see this here in a little bit of why this is important potentially. Talked about credentials. I'm using the same credentials here that I'm going to use in the not as sexy backup and restore, but you can see the second one there. I think you can probably see it just a little bit. There's a V2 actually way down here. I had a couple different ECS environments I was playing with. But you can see you can have a list of credentials there. That's why I didn't clean them out. I wanted everybody to at least see. Maybe you have a few different, I hope you have a few different Dell ECS systems in your environment. But these are pointing right to SQL Backup. Of course, let's run it correctly, Rob, without that big red dragon there. And, oh, yep, not a valid login. So first I have to create a scoped credential. I'm going to use AdventureWorks again. Now this is a specific database scoped credential, not at the server level, at the database level. You can see my identity. With identity, that's a Microsoft construct there, S3 access key, it must be that. And then I've got the key separated, and then the secret there separated by a colon in the secret there. And that comes directly from ECS. Now, let's make sure we highlight the S there too, Rob. A lot of red dragons here in Rob's demos, always, that's how it works. S3DS is what I called it for S3 data source. I can see that right there. There's two that I've got created in the Object Explorer tree. I've got an S3 CSV, I've got an EDS. Then there's also a couple new ones there, external file formats, Parquet file, and then a skip header CSV. Yes, I like to name everything exactly what it is. Now, of course, the database scope credentials, there's the one I just created. Very simple. S3 access key, that must be a constant. That's what the engine's actually looking for right now from an S3 perspective. And then that external data source that I'm pointing out to the root in that ECS and SQL Server V2 ECS box. You can also script this out, as you're probably used to. So you can see exactly what I created already. Not hard, but you have the engine and the options to actually see what's been created at any time with SSMS. Again, all integrated into SSMS. This is 19.0.1 SSMS. Now I'm going to create a couple more external data sources. That one you saw, the S3 CSV, and then the EDS one also. This one's actually pointing, this is interesting. So remember my personas earlier from the ECS lab, I had a data reader and an admin. Well, this one here, this CSV is pointing to the read-only data bucket. You can point to the root, or you can give it, you can nest this. And to be honest, I'm not sure how far you can nest these down. There's probably a limit. But I went in a couple levels deep here. So for my CSV data, it's only going to be sitting in that read-only bucket. Again, the two different data sources, different way of looking at it, using T-SQL. Create those file formats now. Parquet file format, I just give it a name, Parquet file format. Keeps it real easy so you know exactly what it is. And then the skip header CSV, yes, I'm starting with the first row of 2. There's actually an old note there, it's funny, enabled with CTP2. That's how long I've been using SQL 2022 since, well, almost a year and a half now. So now, I have a couple of CSV files, one with 1 million records and one with 5 million records. These are CSVs, and I move them into the object store inside of ECS. Just CSV files. So think about some environments that you probably have in your organization where maybe you're using SSIS to ETL data around, and you're literally forklifting it up, and you're putting it in a SQL Server, and you're doing some work, or you're taking it back out, or you're staging it. Why not just leave it in an object scale and query it where it sits? Why pick it up just to query it and put it back down? It's so much easier to hit the data right where it sits, which is kind of the goal of using SQL Server as a data hub. So I'm putting that, I'm giving it actually a name there, sales records 1 million, and then that CSV, you see it. There's the S3 browser. I've got them carved out in a couple different directories. Inside there's that CSV, named accordingly, and then 5 million records. And these are CSVs that I just, again, ginned up. But the cool thing is, and you're going to see here in a bit, after I create these external tables, so now the engine knows about them, creating them both right now with their data source and their file format, so the engine's well aware of them right now. Now I can actually query them directly. So let's look at these external tables. So I got a bunch here. There's the 1 million, 5 million. I've got some machine orders there. And you see I've also got it carved out into separate calendar years, 11 through 15. I'll show you that here in a second. And of course, I know where the location is, which is out there in S3. You can see the directory tree. Pretty powerful, what you can see from sysviews right now around external tables. You can create statistics on these high cardinality columns. Order ID is mine. So just a quick smoke test. Now I'm querying top 10 from the million and the 5 million. And I'm running this query with T-SQL, but the data, again, does not sit in the engine. It sits out in the object store on S3. And that returned, let's see, what does that say down the bottom right? That returned in 1 second for 2 top 10s. Pretty fast, pretty fast. But we're going to get a lot faster here with bigger sets of data here in a second. So I run a couple counts here. It looks like I've got just a count. From the million row table, it took me about 5 or 6 seconds. 3, 4, 5, okay. So 1 million rows returned in 6 seconds. Took a little longer for 5 million rows. Again, this is a CSV sitting out in the object store bucket. I never brought it in to the SQL Server. Now, who's heard of CTAS? Have you heard of that? Anybody heard of CTAS? CETAS. See it up there on the screen? Create external table as select. There'll be a test here at the end. Steve's going to
That's right. I'll
conduct
keep you
a
honest.
test. Yep. But yeah, so another acronym for your acronym bucket. But create external table as select is what that means. And it's just that. So what am I doing here with the T-SQL? I'm going to create an external table. I'm going to call it external machine orders. I'm going to have a with. I'm going to drop it into a Parquet file using one of my data sources and my file formats. And the as is simply a select statement. That's that big select statement that I was looking at a long time ago. Looks like my 5 million returned in about 32 seconds there. So I did actually create this external table. I kind of pre-populated it. It took about 9 minutes to create this table using CTAS, but there it is using the object browser. Now this is interesting to see. The Parquet files, it doesn't sit as one file, it sits as 4 files. So when it was created, the Parquet engine shards this out into the format, into a Parquet format, so it's stored more efficiently, row-based, compressed and row-based. This is a highly efficient way. That's why the queries that you're going to see here in a second return so efficiently. So that's the engine doing its work, carving out these Parquet files. A quick count from that external table, 200 million rows I have in this external table that I created with that CTAS syntax up above, 200 million rows. And remember, that's not in SQL Server, that's sitting in Dell ECS Object Store, or any S3 at that point. Again, I can create statistics on it. You want to put statistics on a high cardinality column, order ID is mine. It's very unique. Now, there's a few different ways I can query this. I can do open row set, which is, okay, that's kind of cool. And let's put the live execution plan on this. And you see I threw a where clause on there just to bring back 2015 or greater than or equal to 2015. And they come back in about 6 seconds, 1,000 rows. So that's pretty fast. If you think about use cases for this, why would I want to do this, Rob? If I took a bunch of data, especially read-only data inside my SQL Server, everybody has to have big, hairy, maybe fact tables sitting in their SQL servers. Big, tall, wide, what do I do with this table? It's clogging up my backups. When I restore things, it takes a long time just because of 1 or 2 tables. But if these tables are always read-only, never to be updated again, dump them out here. Dump them out into a Parquet file and leave them out there. You can back that up ECS, you can replicate with ECS, but now, as soon as that data is out of the relational engine, you're gaining efficiencies because when someone queries it, it's not pulling it all into cache. You're not backing it up nightly or weekly, whatever your schedule is. There's a lot of reasons to believe why you should dump out these tables or your bigger tables into Object. And that's one of the reasons Microsoft is doing it. So let me do a date distribution so we can see what's actually in those Parquet files. Turn off live query. And just run this date distro. So I'm running against 200 million rows here. Quick date distribution, maybe an aggregate that a sales team would use. Against 200 million rows. 10 seconds came back my date distribution against 200 million rows. And you can see it's kind of evenly distributed there, except for 2015. And this is the data they originally ginned up. So I didn't really put too much thought into how I was going to distribute it. I just let the engine do its work. But that returned really fast. Question?
Yeah.
Oh, here comes the box. Take it.
On Parquet tables, can you join back into, say, a dimensional table within the database?
Yes.
So we do like customer
Redo
extracts.
the question. If you
Yes.
So we have this
the
massive
question
cache
was,
table.
the question was, just paraphrasing, can I join Parquet back to relational data, right? Or dimension or anything. Okay, yes, and I'm going to show you. Because that's the power, right? When I first saw this, while working with some of the guys at Microsoft, and this is what you're seeing now is the evolution of a lot of back and forth. And that's the cool thing that Microsoft is doing now, just in general, with SQL Server. They're taking opinions from the community, from you guys, from us, anybody who wants to participate in the early adopter program, and give them feedback. I mean, again, I'm so old, I remember when you just kind of waited for SQL Server to come out, and then it came out and it was full of bugs, so here come the CTPs right after that, right? It's not like that anymore. They're still CTPs, but the feedback is a lot more, I don't know, it's a good guy. I like it, how everybody's, how the community is actually giving back faster. So super good question, and I love you asked it. It's almost like I seeded the question for you, because here comes the answer here in a second. So another, looks like I did the top 5 again, or 2015 again. Now I also carved out, you saw previously when I was looking at the S3 object browser, I did carve it up by year. So I took all of these, you see where my order date equals 2011 and on 2012, and I did this for everything I had in the distro, and of course I highlight it all and run it all at once. And I only did this because maybe I see my CIO is always running this type of report, so maybe I'm going to carve it up and just make it a little bit faster for him. So there I have inside of 2011, 2012, there's all the data carved out, even more efficient by year, by Parquet, or by multiple Parquet files. And I did that just to make things a little more efficient. And then again, a quick smoke test, top 10 of all of those tables. So all 5 of them, or all of those Parquet external tables, returns in 5-6 seconds. They all came back, just a quick check. That's pretty cool. That's pretty powerful. Now, to answer your question, what did I write there? Now let's join the RDBMS to Parquet. So let's look at this select statement here. The from, right? AdventureWorks sales schema, and then joining AdventureWorks external, EXT, that's what I created, against the machine orders. And of course, I know that I think 52,000 rows. Yeah, I have it up there in my comments. 59,028 rows join up. So that's a small set that's going to come back as a result against 200 million that the engine has to go out and look for. So now, this is the beauty, what I love. I'm joining object to relational, and I'm bringing back results. That's pretty powerful. Now SQL Server becomes really your data hub. There's no reason to keep data, or there's no reason to use another engine. We all love SQL Server. Now it's only getting better. We can query more things. We can query them where they sit. That's pretty powerful. So let's run this select statement here, and let's see how long it takes. I did document there 30 seconds. I can't even remember how long this took. But what am I doing here? Of course, I have to go back and I have to look at all those Parquet sharded files. I have to bring back where machine order, or sales order detail ID equals my order ID in my external table. That's a little bit challenging. Of course, I made it even harder by putting a group by and an order by on, just to make the engine do some real work. I like to see smoke coming out of my SQL Server as best I can. So grouping by those Parquet attributes, yes, also possible. Is it the most performant? No. But is it an excellent way to query big data sets? Absolutely yes. Absolutely. So it returned in 34 seconds. I got back 59,028 rows against the sales order detail table and my Parquet file. That's pretty powerful.
So Rob,
Steve.
let's pause right here. So you mentioned it a couple of times. So realize when Satya was talking about the release of SQL Server 2022, they used the term democratization. And that's been an abused term for over a decade, right? Everybody's heard about this. But what it's doing is it's lowering the bar for anybody that's a traditional SQL user, specifically T-SQL, to go in there and do some big data stuff. So you don't have to necessarily be a Spark analyst or a Cloudera user, or, all these different things that you see out there that require a lot of, PhD level knowledge for some of the people setting these architectures up. You can go and grab this object-oriented data that traditionally you haven't been able to touch from a SQL perspective, and go immediately get that and get insights off of that data with a much lower bar for entry. So at Dell, we're really excited about this, obviously because it's unstructured, semi-structured data getting out to the S3 perspective, but using the common tools that you're using, nothing here was ridiculously rocket science. Hopefully most of you are able to follow what Rob was doing here. So we got about 15 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, another great use case along that line is I was working with a client, East Coast United States, and they had the SaaS folks. You may have some SaaS people in your organization. They like doing SaaS things. They don't like using T-SQL, just the way it is. I love everybody, but the SaaS people just want to be SaaS people. Okay, so but this client, very big client, East Coast, they said, Rob, we have duplicative data because the SaaS guys just want their data a certain way. They have to have it a certain way. We started doing this. We started doing this actually during early adopter days, where instead of having the same data set stored in various locations, just so the SaaS guys and the T-SQL guys can query it separately, they're all querying it now from object using a single source of data. So the SaaS guys carve it up however they want. The T-SQL guys just point to it. Doesn't matter anymore. That's a huge use case. So what is that? You have a savings for storage, more efficient storage, more efficient backups. This is a cascading story that I talk every day, day in and day out. But there's so many reasons to believe to store big data in an object type environment.
And for many of you, it could be cheaper storage. That's
Yes.
a very relative statement, but object can be a lot less expensive than some of the traditional things you've been doing.
Yep. And then to continue on with the comment about Parquet and relational, now let's join that CSV that's sitting out in external tables to a Parquet file sitting out in external tables, not bringing it into T-SQL, and let's put a where clause on it to make the engine, again, do a little work. So let's filter on order date, a couple different years there, against 200 million rows Parquet and a 5 million row CSV, never pulling it into SQL Server, just using T-SQL to query it. And it came back in 4 seconds, 1,000 rows. It's not about, and I had one client, well, I want it faster. They literally told me that. Like, really? This is a huge, massive data set, and it could even be bigger. I was kicking around the idea of maybe 500 million rows. Maybe I'll do that but anyway, this is crazy powerful and crazy fast, but it's more for analytics also, right? Again, if you have these big, huge tables, that's not part of your OLTP system. That's a warehouse system. So clients are okay with waiting 5, 10 seconds for their results. They just are. And now, to close it all out, joining 2 CSV files sitting out in Parquet, yes, that's also possible. I never pull it into the relational engine. I leave it out in object storage. I join 1 million and 5 million. And it returns in, drum roll please, 4, 5. The waiting's the hardest part, right? I wrote 6 seconds. It actually took 10 seconds. So I returned 2 different CSVs joining. That's pretty powerful.
So while he transitions, one of the things that Microsoft has really touted that we, from an early adopter and from a thought leadership perspective with Dell, have really jumped on to is this all the data idea. It's not just traditional relational SQL. It is that. It absolutely is that. But it's all the data sources. And Microsoft's been talking about that for a while, but now with Polybase Parquet, the details that we're seeing here, with just your knowledge that you have today, you can touch all the data sets that are out there. We've got about 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Please, the takeaways from today, ramp up on Parquet, learn it. I highly recommend it. It's not going away. It's only going to get deeper. Yes, S3 was created by Amazon. That does not mean it's Amazon specific. It's simply an open API connectivity. That's it. Delta Lake, also learn about, pay attention to this space with Parquet files. More to come there also in that space, especially even with Microsoft. That's pretty fun and pretty interesting to watch there. But to bring it all together, this is what we just did. We used the database scoped credential. We queried external files. We used Open Row Set, and we also used external tables. And we made some user tables. There's that little acronym, CTAS, create external table as select. One of the use cases then, again, I put together actually for a client, I threw this on the screen here, but it was archiving their data and coming over the top, if you want to, with something like Spark and building jobs to read this data that's sitting out in object or the colder, more cost-efficient data stores. This is all possible now, and then of course you can do all the cool, fun KPIs and Power BI over the top. And this is all on premises. All on premises. So everything that's really cool and whiz-bangy up in Azure, you're doing on premises also right now with big data sets. And then of course the less sexy backup and restore, but you still use, this is T-SQL syntax again. And all I'm doing is backing up to that URL, S3 : bucket name, file name. And the only thing I had to have was, from my demo perspective, and this is the last demo and we are moving on. Yep. So, again, this is not all that hard to put together at all, actually. You just need, again, the certificate from your object store box, and you're connecting with that T-SQL syntax of the S3. So you create your credential again. Now this is actually a server scoped credential. You might have saw them in the previous demo, but I'm using again SQL Server 2022, the RTM version. I have an ECS URL that I created on the ECS load balancer. That's the V2 I'm using there. And then just a access key and a secret key that ECS gives me. Super easy. That's separated by a colon. Again, the identity S3 access key, that is a construct that Microsoft requires. That's what that has to look like. And then those credentials, we saw those from earlier. There they are again, of course, the 2022 and the V2, and simply run the same syntax that everybody in this room knows. Backup database, the only difference is the to URL S3, location, wax SQL backup, and then the .back name, whatever you'd like. And there it goes, writes right out to my ECS device. I can look at it right there, SQL backup, refresh it. It looks like I did it on March 8th. And I wrote it to that SQL backup directory. And remember, I carved out the persona inside that namespace, inside that bucket, so maybe I don't want everybody, I only want the DBA to have access to these backups. I can still use all of my MSDB queries that I have maybe checking my backup sets. They still work. You see the physical device name there is out to the S3 bucket. So that all works just like it did before if you had jobs. And you can also restore files only. I just want to read the header of something sitting out in S3. Again, super easy. What the heck are all those files stored in my backup? Well, there's the standard wide world importers right there. And I can also recover from it or restore from it. And this time I'm going to do an underbar 2 just to drop it back into the same SQL Server. Maybe I ran an update statement without a where clause. I need to go back and restore my database. So you see it's restoring, and refresh the tree and restored. Same syntax, all I'm doing is the with URL or from URL. Question, 5-minute mark, oh look at that. Okay, so I've got 5 minutes left.
There are 2 questions.
Okay, go ahead.
To the mic that is there.
Oh yeah, it's a mic. So, Question number 1. You need to install Polybase to use external tables.
Yes. Yes, you do.
License costs. Do you need Enterprise Edition or can all this work in Standard?
Works in standard.
Another question. Can you use this for on-premise only systems in addition to cloud?
Everything we did was on-prem.
Oh, absolutely, this is all on premises. Good question, but yes.
Yeah, just because the S3, don't assume that it's Amazon Web Services. Those two things are not in equal sign.
That's a good question, but
At all.
yes, yep.
Okay. Okay,
Were
thanks.
those the questions? Oh, question back there.
Behind you.
Hold on. Sorry. That this technology also works in Azure SQL database or just in managed instance?
Well, this is not just managed instance. So Azure SQL database being in the cloud, yes, this functionality, because remember, it's the same SQL Server build. But this was all SQL Server deployed on premises, or SQL in Linux, or SQL in a container, or Azure Arc enabled data services, which is the same SQL in a container engine. But this is all on premises.
Okay.
Yeah, so think about the use case. I mean, how many of you have object that you might have, but you're not touching? Because traditionally, you never have. Well, now you have a good reason to, and especially from a cost perspective, especially if you already have an investment there. So if anybody's doing that from an object perspective, from a semi-structured perspective, big data perspective, go use that. It's a, quote, free resource you have available because of the access you have around all the data set being driven by this SQL connectivity. We've got 2 minutes left.
Yep. So just a little bit of kind of where we're going with Microsoft and all the clouds. Because here at Dell, we love all the clouds on the screen. You might be running SQL Server in Amazon here. Maybe you are. So from Dell, we're bringing our software-defined storage to all clouds. Right now, we have it in AWS, coming soon to more clouds near you. This is pretty powerful. Just pay attention. This is the space that actually I moved over to, which I'm pretty excited about right now, bringing everything that Dell has kind of as a big umbrella across all of the clouds. So now we're using SQL Server, and boy, my head is full of use cases, so come back next year. We're going to have even more use cases to show in this space. If you're interested in it, please stop by and talk with me more in person. I'm happy to talk about it. Continued learning, a lot of papers. Oh boy. HCI, course object store, data analytics, the ones we did with AMD down here, some design guides too, around everything we talked about, putting together entire solutions. We do a lot of solutioning and kind of thinking about what clients are thinking about, talking with them and understanding maybe where they're going. And I'm happy to have a one-off too, anytime you'd like. So here's the SQL bits feedback.
Yeah. This is for this session. So scan this if you would. We'd love to get your feedback, or we'll get the feedback after the end of this conversation. Yes, Andy?
Steve, Rob, can you go back to that previous slide?
Yes.
It's worth pointing out to people that may not be aware that Dell is very open with its information. And along the bottom of the slides there, you see the info hub, delltechnologies.com. If you go there, you will find masses of information that's really useful, that you think that might be hidden well inside Dell, but it's not. It's published. Dell puts it there. So please feel free to go and take that info hub, Dell Technologies location.
Let's go to the next slide so they can capture that survey. Yeah, so infohub.delltechnologies.com. We take a very prescriptive, dozen white paper, 50, 60, 70-page white papers showing you how to do this. A lot of our competition is more, go talk to services. We want to enable that in your hands. How many of you guys were on the SQL 2019 Big Data Cluster path? Any of you guys touched on that? Well, if that was of interest to you, keep your eyes open for the next couple of quarters. Some of the things that we're working on. How do we get scale out Spark, Kubernetes, big data? How do we absorb that from a SQL perspective, using the same path we talked about earlier? That's where we're going. So keep your eyes and ears open. We'll talk about some of this stuff at Dell Technology World. We'll talk about some of this stuff at Microsoft Ignite. Hopefully we'll be invited back again for SQL Bits next year. Rob, last thought?
Yeah, I hope you guys liked it. I hope you found it interesting and cool and informative. Go back and learn it. Go start playing with it. This is a big space here. It really, really is. And it's only getting bigger. So thank you, everyone. I
Thank you,
appreciate
everybody.
it.